Absolutely.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our monthly webinar here for January. We have an interesting topic today, something that, for a lot of gym owners, coaches that might be on here that are already part of the collective might feel like it's not too relevant a topic. Obviously, you guys already outsource programming, and today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons. But I think there's still some really valuable takeaways for anyone. And hopefully, if we have someone that's joining that is considering outsourcing their programming, there might be some of these cons that, do relate to them, and hopefully some of the pros that you can consider now and make you, help you make the right decision for your business. So without further ado, we have Jason here, MDV. MDV, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing to add here, I know that you guys, a lot of people listening or watching are part of the are members of the NCFIT collective already, which is awesome. But we also want to give you some really practical advice on how to best utilize the product and how to best utilize all of the content that we put out through the NCFIT collective. So not necessarily just a debate on pros and cons of outsourcing your programming, but like when you do outsource your programming or you do have access to a product like the NCFIT collective, how can you go about utilizing that to the max?
Yeah,
that's right.
I think this conversation, I'm really looking forward to it. I'll tell you why. Obviously, we have a bias. Of course, people are going to listen to this and be like, well, of course, you're going to put a bunch of pros in your category of outsourcing programming because you have a vested interest because you sell that as a product. Yes, you're right. But I think what's also really important is having an open conversation that there are some cons, but I think the pros outweigh the cons, but we're okay to talk about the cons because ultimately clear communication of the pros and cons, I think, is the key, and each owner should make their decisions. It is not all or nothing. It's not perfect all the time because there are some things to take into consideration. I'm excited to talk about that today and our journey of how we even got to where we're at NCFIT, and because we've done it all, and now we are at where we're at.
So I think a good place to start, and I wrote these down. So obviously, I've spent a lot of time on the phone with different gym owners and coaches, usually in the process of them trying to see if the collective or even just outsourcing programming in the beginning is a good fit. So I've definitely come across a couple of trends or, common questions that I think fall in line with, what people at least perceive as the cons of outsourcing programming. So I think that we can kind of go through those, and I'm really curious to hear, MDV and Jason, your thoughts on these, and also why maybe it's not as big a deal as it might be, or maybe it is something to consider. So the first one that I have is, a lot of people always say, well, how can anyone that outsources their programming, whether it's us or anyone else that does it, know my community as well as I do? How can you guys, our team, regardless of the fact that we have a lot of expert coaches, years of experience, really smart people writing this stuff, how can they know the very specific needs of my gym and my community? Question I get all the time. MDV, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that somebody like NCFIT, let's just take us for example here. We have been running gyms for a long fucking time, running community-based fitness facilities for a very, very long time. This NCFIT was going about doing this at a very high level before I joined. I joined about 5 years ago, but we've been doing it for about 12 years total. Jason has a tremendous amount of experience. I have a tremendous amount of experience, coached hundreds of thousands of workouts, hundreds of thousands of athletes. That gives us a very, very strong base to build off of. So I think that that's one of the things that's really important to recognize is that we are doing this stuff every single day with you guys and like you guys and administering these programs to a community-based atmosphere. We're not an elite fitness community. Maybe in the past we had a little bit more of a tinge of that at NCFIT where we had some really high level competitors. But even at that time, that was more of the perception than the reality. The reality was it was still a community-based fitness center. Fast forward to present day, we are 100% a community-based fitness center. We have people of all walks of life coming into the gyms every day. People who have never done a functional fitness workout before and people who are very, very advanced in functional fitness. So we're catering to that wide breadth of audience, just like everybody else out there who is opening their doors, to a community-based fitness environment. Now, I think that's the answer that the quote unquote like party line answer that I want to give you guys there is like, yeah, we have a vested interest in that. And that's what makes our product really, really great. But also anybody who tells you that they know exactly what your community is doing is feeding you a line of bullshit. Like there's no way that we could exactly know who's walking into your gym every single day. We can come close because we have a very similar community, but ultimately at the end of the day, you guys are the shepherds of your fitness community's journey. You know which athletes are showing up at which time. We'll never know that. The best thing that we can do is take all of our knowledge and experience and all of those years of running group fitness classes and currently administering the same program to a group fitness environment, and couple that with really well thought out programming that is planned around avatar style communities and avatar style classes and avatar style athletes. So when we're building our workouts, we're building the stimulus, we're building those briefs, we're not specifically building them to NCFIT. We're building them to like an avatar size gym, an avatar size class, an avatar number of coaches in that class. And of course, you guys are referencing our stimulus where you see fittest and you see all, and those are avatars as well. They're averages of what we believe people can then make really smart decisions off of. We have to adjust some of the workouts and we have to adjust some of the things within our briefs to fit the spaces in our gyms because we're not all cookie cutter. Our Mountain View location looks very different from our Campbell location, looks very different from our Redwood City location. So it's the very same process that we go through. But that's the answer that I would give you that I think is most well-rounded, that gives you guys not only, hey, what makes NCFIT stand out, but also a bit of the truth. You have to look at the program and you have to look at the briefs, and you're going to have to sometimes make some micro adjustments, hopefully not crazy adjustments because we are going towards those averages, those avatars. But yeah, you will have to adjust based on who's walking into the gym every day.
You know, I think that's such a good point, right? Like even in our ecosystem of NCFIT gyms, there are so many differences that you're right. Like we use the same exact collective service. We, for all intents and purposes, outsource our programming, and that we're using the collective for a Mountain View or Redwood City, and even some of the corporate locations that are very different to our commercial locations, and they're doing the same programming. And there are a lot of differences that kind of take into account there. Jay, I think what would be super interesting, because you had mentioned this before, how did we get to the point where, like, when in NCFIT's kind of history of growing and having different locations, did it become evident that we needed something that was a kind of central product for these different locations?
Well, I think just to back up for a second. So you say, nobody knows my community better than I do. Okay, I agree. 100%. This morning, I just got done coaching 30 minutes ago, and I went off the brief. But as I'm going through it, I'm adjusting for our members that are in the location. And so, for example, today I did NCX. For those of you who've seen it, it incorporated a pull-up and box jump over and bike. But throughout that workout, I'm still tailoring it 100%. But I use the programming as a baseline, and then I adjusted it. So one would say that I know our community better than anybody, meaning I knew the community in that class at that moment better than anybody. And we can't argue with that. All I did, though, was utilize the NCX and collective resources to help me provide the best product for my community. And so I think it's interesting when you think about people who talk about their community. And I think that it's important to note that each one's different. But I'd say within your community, each class is different. Maybe your 3:30 class might be different from your 5:30 class, and your morning crew might be different than later crew. Maybe a demographic is more working parents, and later on, maybe it's more athletes, whatever. And even for anybody listening who owns a gym, I know for a fact that when you look at your community, there is differences in the classes, and you approach each class maybe slightly differently. Well, that same thing applies on a macro level to the way that we're providing. All we're providing is a high-level tool resource, and then you could then utilize that as needed throughout the duration of the day, and ultimately still be in charge of your own community. Now, the way we got here, I think this is an interesting note. We outsourced our program before outsourcing your programming was even a thing. And what I mean by that is that I started following CrossFit.com in 2006. At that point, I was following personally CrossFit.com, and I was cherry picking. When we opened the gym in 2008, the natural thing at the time was I said, hey, why reinvent the wheel if the wheel's already been created? That was my logic. And so we outsourced to CrossFit.com. We followed that program consistently without fail for about 15 months. After about 15 months, we recognized that to these people that are talking to you, Gabe, they didn't know my community. Would have been way, maybe I would adjust it. But what they really didn't know was my equipment needs, the 3 on 1 off. There was other things that made it very difficult to run traditional CrossFit.com programming, because the way we would do it is we'd have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday would be an off day. And then you would have to choose from one of the previous workouts to do. It wasn't conducive to running a solid community-based fitness program back then. Now that's evolved. So at that point, we had then start programming on our own. After a few years of doing that, as our gyms expanded, we realized we needed to do better. We were just providing our coaches the workout, but we weren't providing a full plan. And so each coach would go in there and it would be a crapshoot of what they would do. And so then we started producing our own plans on Google and whatnot. And that was about maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe even more. We started doing that. And then recently we've been evolving that program. So that's kind of a transition. We started doing outsourcing. We realized we need to do something for ourselves. But now essentially we are outsourcing again to the collective and tailoring it towards our community.
You know, and I like what Greg put in the chat box here, and I want to keep this kind of interactive because I think this ties to kind of what you were saying, Jay. Greg's question is, you know, he's been trying CrossFit's CAP program, and he said that every now and then they slide in a 5K run as the workout of the day. He understands why from like a holistic, like, you know, there are days that, you know, you're focusing on running, but, you know, that doesn't really work for his community. That's not something that's going to be particularly exciting. So not a big deal to just, you know, plug in a replacement workout, but his advice is like, what would we do in that scenario, or how do we handle that? And before I hand this off to you guys, because I know MDV is chomping at the bit here.
I'm chomping at the bit too on this one.
I'll hand it off to you guys in a second. Just for anyone that is here as an attendee, you know, a big reason we wanted to do this topic is, you know, because CAP launched, CrossFit launched this CAP program. I think a lot of gyms have now experienced outsourcing programming because they got to kind of dip their toe with something that was offered free. So I think that these are all great questions. So if anyone else has specific questions, I want to keep this webinar a little bit interactive. So without further ado, MDV, I'll give you first take at this question.
Oh, I know this one grinds Jason's gears. I'm going to chomp at it first though. So listen, a 5K run, a 1 rep max deadlift, 2,000 meter row.
L-sit.
Yeah, single L-sit. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. You'll get your turn, Jay. No, but for real, like those are great workouts. They're great tests. But when you're thinking about running a community-based fitness environment in a class, and you are looking to create a really entertaining 1 full hour worth of fitness, I'm not saying it's not possible to be done, but the caliber of coach that you need to be operating on like the millionth level of coaching to take that one thing, that 5K, to create that really great holistic experience from minute 0 to minute 60, where the athletes leave and they walk out and they go, I just got my socks knocked off by someone coaching a 5K. It can be done. I know it can be done. I've done it before. I know Jason has done it before. But here's the deal also, regardless of coaching skill involved, it's not necessarily an awesome thing to do to open up your computer or your app on your phone or wherever you're putting your workouts, and for your community-based athletes, those people who are paying you 150, 200 bucks a month, and see something that they could theoretically or literally do out the front door of their house and be like, why did I even need to pay for this gym? Why am I even going to the gym today? And of course you can extrapolate out and go, well, you're paying for the community, you're paying for the coaching, all that stuff. Yeah, but people don't like to hear that. I tend to agree that, and Jason's on the same page as me as this, we do not program monostructural or single modality days like that, where that is the only thing that the athletes will get that day. We sneak them in other ways. We sneak them in as, you know, components of workouts that have longer monostructural or longer single modality elements in there, but then we'll hide it with something else in there where you're alternating between body weight movements. Or we'll put it into an extended finisher where you have a shorter sprint style workout where everybody like really punches the gas and gets that sweatiness and gets that really high energy thing out there. And then they go after the thing at the end, or flip-flopping it, doing a little bit more of a really long extended strength session to hit that single or that double, but then finishing it off with something where everybody goes, hey, I really got my great workout in today. Our goal is to always create that holistic experience. And yes, you can do it with a 5K run. It is extremely difficult. And I still think that there's athletes who would look at you and go, why did I come to the gym today when I could have just done this any other day of the week on my own?
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that, The reality is we run for-profit fitness centers. That's what we do. We are not a charity-based organization, although we do a lot of charity outside of the business, right? We are a for-profit business, as everyone who I'm sure is listening or will listen to this is. Now, because of that, we need to bridge the gap between what people want, need, hear, etc. Our goal is threefold. Have a great time is number one. They need to come into your gym and have an amazing experience. Have fun. If they're not having fun, they're not going to come back. Get in a great workout and learn something new. Those are the three goals that I have every single day. But the first one on that list is to have fun. Set the atmosphere. The vibes are right. And the workout is a component of that. So at NCFIT, I think what we've done over the years is we've evolved, right? There was days back in the day where we would do a, 5x5 back squat and that's it. And what I learned was that as an owner of a gym and predicated on my ability to put food on the table for my kids, was that although that might have been a great stimulus for them, athletes wanted to sweat before they went home. It was just a fact. And so we were getting attrition. And so I think what we've learned through programming, talk about the pros and cons of outsourcing, is that we are definitely more on the side of a for-profit business because we had to be over the years. And so if your gym is looking to incorporate a programming that is fun and effective, that's where we really land. And if your gym wants to focus on, more single modality days, that's fine. That just isn't for us because we haven't found that conducive to remember retention and having them come back as often as possible.
I think really good answers to those questions. And just to keep it moving with, another really good question Greg had, this is a topic that I had written down to cover on this, so might as well get to it now. And I get this from coaches and gym owners all the time, both when they're thinking about outsourcing and also like during that first month, like they're starting to get it and they run into this difficulty. And it's creating buy-in with their coaching team and their members to an extent. And I think the specific situation that Greg brought up is, a lot of gyms are paying one of their coaches, their head coach, for the programming. It's a big part of their job and responsibility. So with a lot of gyms having that setup, how do you get them to buy into the idea of outsourcing programming where maybe they feel like something that they're in charge of, they're no longer in charge of? And usually that head coach is the one that's going to give you the most hesitancy to buy in and might find every little kind of hole to poke in why they don't like it, why it's not a good fit, and why they should go back to the status quo of having that coach program.
So I firmly believe that gym owners, the people who own the business, have a fiduciary responsibility to the business. You do. And one of those things that you need to think about is, yeah, I might have a coach, a part-time coach, or even full-time coach right now who's handling all of my programming. But what happens if that person leaves? What happens if that person needs a week off? What happens if that person loses interest? What happens if that person's not keeping their skills sharp? What happens if they get lazy? Those kinds of things are really important considerations to think about. It's all hunky-dory until somebody goes, hey, I'm going to go coach at the gym down the street. And now all of a sudden, arguably one of the most important things that you're putting out there on the floor. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but damn, you have to have workouts to run. You have to have really good workouts to run. And they have to be backed up by a plan and a long-term goal and a long-term vision, plus tools and resources to go out there and have your coaches run the most fantastic classes possible. I firmly believe that. That is a responsibility for gym owners. Now, whether or not you are outsourcing your program to somebody like NCFIT or you're creating that stuff on your own, different story. But, with these conversations that happen with coaches or head coaches who are highly invested in programming, it can be touchy, but you have to do what's best for the business. And ultimately, these people are employees for you, right? And they, if they want to continue to earn a wage in your business, have to do what's best for the community and the business overall. The way that they make money is that you pay them. And the way that you make money is that more members continue to come into your gym and more members stay longer. Now, doing that, if you have a coach who's grinding against you and is not willing to give up their kind of grip on the programming and, you're not super happy with it, ultimately, that's not the best situation. So, you have to figure out how to tactfully approach that conversation with that head coach. You have to try to sell it to them in a way where this might be a change for a short period of time, but we're actually taking some of this responsibility off your plate, free you up to allow you to do other stuff. If you're having issues with the programming, if you're not happy with it, you have to be upfront with not only the feedback to that person, but the expectation, so that it doesn't come as like a complete shock. You know, if you go into them and say, hey, I'm taking this away from you, I haven't been happy, but they never knew that. That's also another layer to this conversation. You know, there's a lot of things that go into that. A lot of coaches get wrapped up in the ego of programming because they think it's like the absolute be all and end all. They end up like attaching a huge amount of their identity to it, which ends up also having downsides in terms of what their biases, their personal biases are in terms of what workouts actually go out there onto the floor. You know, if you deeply examine a lot of single coaches programming, person who's working out within that gym, a lot of movements that they don't like don't often show up. A lot of workout formats that they don't like don't often show up. So there's heavy bias involved there. You know, I'll hand it off to Jason to see if he has any topics on that subject as well. But I also want to come back to buy-in because I think that that's really important. Jay, how about that head coach conversation?
I mean, this is a very important conversation. I just want to acknowledge something. This is something and Greg, thank you so much for bringing this up. And I appreciate the insight on. So Greg's saying that his head coach spends about 10 hours a week at the start of a cycle and 5 hours a week during the cycle. We typically run 8-week cycles. Now he's acknowledging that what's cool is that his head coach can evaluate the soreness, the reaction of the athletes, and then adjust it. Understood. Got it. So here's my question back. What type of a product can you create for your gym if you're spending 8, 10, 5 hours a week on that particular product? So to put in perspective, at NCFIT and other programming providers, I am not, you know, obviously we're pitching us, but other ones too. We have a full team that tests the workouts, curate the plans. I mean, we must have at least 8 full-time people that's all they do for us, if not more. So we're spending hundreds of hours a week developing these plans that then go out to gyms with a variety of different programs. So the first question I'd ask is, can your coach produce a great plan and a great workout structure on 5 hours a week? And if the answer is maybe, okay, cool. But the other thing I would say is that maybe what you do for the head coach is you utilize an outsourced program and then allow that head coach to tweak it a little bit and adjust it based on how the members are feeling, right? So I'm in the gyms all the time. And I could speak from experience that like last night I was in the gym. I had a member be like, dude, this has been a tough week, blah, blah. So maybe what I could do for that class, depending on their participation levels, is I could adjust it personally. But doesn't mean that I need to go, have a new workout cycle. I could just adjust the workouts as they are, as needed based on what I'm hearing from the athletes. And so I think that the question becomes for the head coach, and MDV brought up a really good point. If that coach leaves, if there's buy-in in the programming and they go down the street, what happens to your location? But most importantly, if you're spending 5 hours a week on your programming, how much time and attention are you putting on it? Whereas if you put 40 hours a week, well, now you might be spending too much time. You should be focused on other things. So the question becomes, would the business be better off outsourcing a program at a high level, allowing the head coach to optimize in other areas, sales and marketing, getting new leads, focusing product on the floor, coaching development, and then tweak the programming a little bit on a week-by-week basis? I would suggest, I think that that's a better option, because I don't know if the best bang for the buck for that head coach that you're paying a premium for is programming, actually writing, versus coach development or getting new leads or activating new members.
And the last sentence on that comment, Jay, I think leads into what MDV wanted to talk about, which is the athletes love the customized feel.
Yeah.
Because I think that buy-in is a big piece of this. And it's not only buy-in at the coach and head coach level, but the athletes, right? Like if you're a gym, and I'm going to keep using Greg as an example because he's, being very interactive in the chat box. If you have a gym that has for a very long time programmed in-house, the athletes know that. They probably have a coach that everyone loves, that they know does the programming, that they are feeling they're getting this very customized approach. They're seeing how the athletes feel. They're making changes week to week. If you take all the information you're getting now and you're like, hey, it is the best decision for the business to outsource programming, how do you make that change in a way where you're not going to have, those athletes come up to you and be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I love that customized feel that I had before. I love what, Coach Jason was programming for us. How do you mitigate that as best as possible?
Yeah. So let me clarify something really quickly. If things are going really great and the owner is super happy and the
Keep doing what you're doing.
yeah, and the head coach is super happy and the athletes are super happy and you're getting leads and the athletes are having success and people are getting hurt on like a minimal margin, and you have a really great working relationship with your head coach and you're super happy with the cycle-based approach, keep doing what you're doing. I'm not saying that you have to sign up to the NCFIT.
Great point.
Great point.
But,
Thanks, MDV.
yeah, for sure. But if you are looking at this and you're going, God damn, I'm not super happy with what's going on. This person's time could be better utilized elsewhere. I do feel like it's a liability having this one person control such a big part of the business. Then yeah, I do think you have a responsibility to examine the situation. So if you do go through that thought process and you look at those variables and you're like, damn, I'm going to start to look elsewhere. I think one of the things is you have to do your due diligence on your own first. You have to figure out and you have to line up with a program or a program provider that you go, my fitness vision is very similar to these people's fitness vision. This is what they stand for. This is what I stand for. Now, when you go from an in-house program to an outsourced program, you are necessarily going to have some differences right away. Even if it's not in like the overall feel of the workouts, even if it's not in like the fitness vision, but even just how the workouts are like structured or organized, or how the notes are presented, or like you see how the weights are listed. There's all these things that will change that you want to be ahead of with your coaches first and then your community next. So, if you do make the decision to sign up with the NCFIT Collective or whoever else, first of all, you got to know the program in and out. You really have to take some time to look at it. Then what I think you should do is you should explain why to your coaches. You should sit them down in a team meeting and articulate the why. Why did we go this route? First of all, if you have somebody like a head coach who's programming for you, you don't want to catch them like off guard. So you have to inform that person first, and you have to have a plan and a conversation, make sure it's an open dialogue back and forth, but then sit down with the team as a whole and explain to them the why behind this thing and get them on board. Look at all the cool stuff that the coaches are going to benefit from as well. One of the unsung heroes of the NCFIT Collective, and this is something that I know Jason's super fired up on, but I'm super fired up on it as well, is that we have solved the problem of what to do when your coaches look at you and go, what are we doing for coaching development? This is what we do for coaching development. Every single day, your coaches have access to essentially a scholarly article on the business of fitness. On this is what we do. This is our profession. They get to read all this stuff, the highlights, the intro, the warm up, the stimulus, the movement adjustments, the teaching section, all that stuff. They get to learn every single day and be fully immersed in that. That's a huge, huge benefit for any coaching staff. So you get those people bought in. And then also, like Jason was saying, yeah, maybe you take your head coach and that person's now responsible for making the tweaks and adjustments that fit your community. But in regard to the specific administration of the workouts, no matter who you're signing up with, whether it's us or somebody else, your coaches must go out on the floor and coach these workouts like it's their favorite workouts of all time. There can't be any chinks in the armor. There can't be any of that stuff, because as soon as they start to sow the seeds of discontent to the members, they go out there on the floor and they're not super fired up, or they go out and they say, oh, you know what, we outsourced our program now and it sucks, or they go out and they just say, I'm not super fired up about this workout. I would have wrote something better. Now, all of a sudden you got a big issue on your hands. First of all, that's complete nonsense. Any coach that goes out there and does that is really, really immature. You have to have a conversation with that person right away. Number two, you can't let it go any further than that. You have to preempt it. You have to get way ahead of it, and you have to make sure your coaching staff is on board. And if the coaching staff is on board, the members will be on board.
Really good answers there. I mean, it all starts from top to the bottom. Jay, anything you wanted to add to that, specifically buy-in?
No, I just think from Greg's perspective, I've been where you're at, Greg. I have personally been in your exact same position. And ultimately, I think that you need to do what's best for you, your business, and the long-term trajectory of it. And there's a reason why thousands and thousands of gyms outsource their programming, because the programming is a piece of the puzzle, but it's a fraction of the puzzle. The rest is all about growing the membership base, retaining your members, getting referrals, optimizing the performance on the floor. And all we're doing is providing you the tools so your coaches to then go out there and go do their best job. So I think Greg, you're and others, right, who are considering this, it's a really exciting conversation, actually. It's a really exciting conversation because it could it could be a game changer for your business if you haven't done it yet. That could really free up some people to go do some really, really cool stuff. So instead of thinking about the actual workout, now they're thinking about how to optimize that actual workout for the class given. That's what I do. When I go in for the gym, that's what I'm thinking about. How do I take this and mold it to be perfect for that class versus trying to, what am I doing in the first place? You know what I mean? I already know what I'm doing. Now I'm just molding it.
You know, and I think that with that, we can kind of shift to, you know, going from the cons of outsourcing programming to the pros, which, you know, obviously I think we're a little biased on, but, you know, the first one, and I think that the big one is time saving, right? It's giving, go ahead.
Can I add one more con? Because I
Yeah,
just want
sure.
to be, I want to be really
Sure.
upfront.
For sure.
I think the cons are, you know, you could maybe take away the community doesn't feel as bought in because they don't feel as in touch, right? I think your coaches need to be on board. Maybe that's tough, right? But I think that the major one that I would bring up, right, is you have to align with the programming philosophy and whatnot. We offer a variety of different programs, but I would say the major one is equipment. I think that equipment in space becomes another con that you need to just be aware of, and that your gym might have, for example, 8 GHDs. We don't really program GHDs because we want to optimize the space. So like MDV, we might want to talk about that a little bit because that is a potential con if you have unique equipment that you want to use.
Yeah, I think it's a consideration less than a con. So, you know, it's something you have to think about. Yeah. Like I was saying before, we program based around an avatar set of equipment and avatar style space. So we're thinking about like a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot usable space gym that's got just about everything that you would see if you walk into a functional training gym, with the exception of a few items. Jason already brought it up. We don't program the GHD outright. We will offer it as a substitution. You can add it back in if you'd like, but because they take up so much space and we realize not all gyms have them, or not all gyms have the number of them that you would need to run effective workouts, we specifically leave it out. We also specifically leave out strongman style equipment. We specifically leave out sled style equipment, any sort of like yokes or things like that, you know, just because they're fantastic training tools. I love using those things, but not everybody has them. And oftentimes they can't be utilized in workouts effectively. If you do have that stuff, feel free to add it on in wherever you see fit, or to build it on in as a finisher, or build it on as an extended warm up, or to add in the GHDs on days when we're doing good mornings or hip extensions, or you know, sit-ups, things like that. So you can work around that pretty easily. It would be something where you look at your space and you go, hey, I'm kind of like a hybrid type of functional training / strongman type of space, and I utilize the strongman equipment all the time. Then you definitely need to take a little bit more consideration in terms of like, hey, am I signing up for a program that's going to take half of my business and put it on the wayside?
And on the flip side of the equipment conversation, another side is that if you outsource your programming and they utilize, for example, Concept 2 rowers or bikes, and you don't have that many, for example, I'd look at it in two ways. One is we always give adjustments. So always we have adjustments. But the other is our goal at NCFIT, and like this is truthfully my goal, is for your business to be crushing it so well that you have the financial means to go acquire the equipment that you need to offer the classes that you want to provide. Right? That's our goal. We want to build businesses. We don't just want to put out programming. We want to see this entire industry thrive. So if you're looking at your equipment, you're saying, wow, I only have one rower and 2 bikes. How am I going to do this programming? Well, initially we'll give you substitutions and scales and adjustments, as MDV was saying, where it's a consideration. But again, layer onto that, our goal would be to help you with your member retention and acquiring new members because they're having so much fun that they refer their friends, that you could then afford to go buy those new pieces of equipment.
One more question that we have from Greg before we move on to the pros. And this kind of falls
question
into,
too.
And this also falls into like, you know, this idea of considerations. You know, what do we do to benchmark progress for our athletes? Do we benchmark progress for athletes at NCFIT gyms, and therefore we know that the programming is producing progress at gyms that use our programming? Kind of what's our view on making sure that there's proof in the pudding per se?
Well, it depends on your athlete's goals. It really depends also on your philosophy on what you want to measure progress against. So, you can certainly have a provider, whether like SugarWOD or Beyond the Whiteboard or something like that, where you are measuring scores, keeping track of weights, all that kind of good stuff. You can certainly go another route where you're not necessarily maintaining active count of scores, and you're more so looking at your community and how your people are looking, how your people are feeling, what's their reaction to the program. And that's a little bit more kind of ethereal, but it definitely is valuable. I'm not saying that either one of those is more important than the other. I think we get really wrapped around the axle with this idea that everything needs to be measured and scored, but that's kind of more of like a modern invention in terms of like what we came up with in CrossFit early on, that is like wrapped ourselves around the axle so tightly that everything needs a score. And I think a lot of times it can be detrimental. I'm not saying that it's all detrimental. I think that a lot of times it can be detrimental where we're focusing on numbers more so than focusing on effort or having fun or making sure that we're continuing to think really healthfully about how we are approaching fitness and nutrition and health. So, at NCFIT, one of the things that we do with the collective, we put out a year-long programming blueprint. It's called the 2022 Programming Outlook document. It outlines all the goals that we want to achieve for our workouts. To look back, It's a look back at 2021. It also outlines all the different benchmark workouts that we're going to do in all of our different programs, and that's an opportunity for all of our athletes and also all of our collective members to monitor or test ourselves to see whether or not we're improving. Are our scores on these workouts moving up, or are they degrading quite significantly? Are we feeling really good in these workouts? Are we able to make small micro adjustments and feel really great regardless of whether or not we're monitoring the scores? But having a pulse on the community, more so in my opinion, from like, how are people feeling? Are they achieving their personal goals? Are they having a good time when they walk into the gym? Are your numbers in the gym going up? Are they referring their friends? That's kind of how I think about results in the gym. And then also, of course, across the shirt, you got to wear it every single day. Are you putting in your best effort every single day? And that's what we're all about at NCFIT.
And I would just add one more layer on that, Greg, and for everyone listening, is that, if you want to look at your workouts and scores, I get it. I would also recommend then, if you're going to take that approach, then you also look at your numbers of your gym just as importantly. So for example, if you're really tracking everybody's progress on a whiteboard and every single day you're putting the Fran times down, 215, 230, all throughout the day, and you're that interested in that data, right? Then are you just as interested in tracking your average attendance? How often are people coming in? Your, average membership value, right? How often, what's your average, how long are members staying with you? And how is your membership growth? So I think that those are numbers that traditionally in the CrossFit space, we didn't really talk about. We talked more about, hey, what time did you get on that workout? But just as importantly is, hey, my average member comes in 4 times a week. Because I'll tell you what, if you can get your average member to come in 4 times a week and they're putting in their best effort, they're probably gonna be getting a lot fitter. So just, there's 2 sides of that coin. I think we should be looking at both.
For sure. I just saw, well, that was a long one coming. I'm gonna have to read that from Marco. So in the time being, let me just get you guys started on one thing. And it's this idea that, a big pro that we talk about constantly for outsourcing programming is saving time, right? Save time for the gym owner, save time for the head coach that might be doing the programming. So my question for you guys that I would like kind of your insight on is, if you decide to go this route because you do want to save time, how can a gym owner, either for himself or for the head coach, identify where this like new time should go? Because there's you mentioned a bunch of things before, Jay, leads, sales, marketing. What are some useful ways to identify, okay, where's this new time and resources going to be allocated to if you're taking advantage of this big pro of, I'm spending 8 hours a week on programming. Now that might turn into 1 or 2 hours a week because I'm tinkering a little bit. What is the best bang for your buck? Is it coaches development? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Kind of how you do you identify those things? Go ahead, MDV.
What's this person's title?
So let's start.
What's their title?
Let's start with the head coach. Head coach that's programming.
What should they be doing? What's the most important thing that person could be doing? It's not a trick question. They should be coaching. When you have these people who are in your gym, who this is their number one skill set, this is the number one thing that they do well. I understand that coaching is a rigor, and it can be really, really challenging to coach a lot of classes in a day and a lot of classes in a week. I did that life for a long time. I get it. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody long term. But if you're constantly driving this person down to a minimal amount of hours on the floor coaching, not only are you not maximizing their skill set, you're not getting the most bang out of the buck for the members and your number one coach being on the floor and coaching a good amount of hours. I'm not saying they have to coach 20 hours a week for the rest of their life. But if you're constantly driving this down to administrative duties or soft skill stuff where they might not necessarily be even as talented, as somebody who could be a potential front desk member, their talent really lies in going out on the floor and changing athletes' lives. I think that that's really an important conversation to have with people. But you also have to be realistic about like, what is the long-term trajectory within your business? I think this is something that's a little bit tangential outside the question that Gabe asked, but having these types of conversations with your coaches and deeply understanding where you are going as a business, what's the reality of this person continuing to move up in the business? Or is it the reality that, hey, you can be in this head coaching role, you're going to probably coach X number of hours per week, you're going to have these other responsibilities. And yeah, I want to continue to help you grow, continue to help you make some more money as we go. But ultimately, this is the best I can offer you right now. I don't want to sell you a bag of goods and pretend like, hey, we're going to go off and create, the next future of fitness business. I think those conversations are really important to have early on, and they make it much easier down the road if that person doesn't comes to you and says, hey, I thought I was going to do X, Y, and Z. So just being real with these people, giving them things that they are really, really great at, also opening up the opportunity for them to earn more money through things like small group PT or PT is a fantastic way that they can earn more money without necessarily you paying them necessarily more money and adding value into the business where a lot of people within the functional training space are looking for either skill development, one-on-one training, nutrition advice, consulting, all that kind of stuff.
As like a very specific answer to your question, Gabe, I think MDV described it as well. But I would just say that if a head coach is a head coach and their responsibility is to coach 20 hours a week and do this is coach 20 hours a week, program for 10 hours a week, and front desk for 10 hours a week. Let's just say that was their role. If you took off the programming, they could then spend 10 hours a week making sure that they follow up with each lead within X amount of time and engage with new members and do one-on-one consulting, like new member onboarding. You could hypothetically, if they were doing additional coaching, all that is good. But if they stop programming, what could I have them do? Make sure that every single lead that came in the door was serviced accordingly, could probably help you attain new members and retain as well.
I think that that's also a really big piece for gym owners, because I do know that a lot of, maybe not most, but definitely a lot of gyms that I talk to, at least, it tends to be the gym owner that's doing the programming. So yes, there are some that have the head coach where that's a responsibility, but there are still a lot of gyms where the gym owner, the owner operator, is the one that's kind of owning this. And I think that in that case, I can definitely speak to the fact that, sales and marketing falls on the gym owner. Like at the end of the day, getting new people into the gym, having people come in and become paying members is a big responsibility for the gym owner. And if you're out there and you are not happy with where your business is financially, what it boils down to is getting more people in the door. And so I think that saving that time to then use for sales and marketing initiatives is huge. And one thing that I'm going to share right now in the chat box is we recently put out a 4-piece kind of sales and marketing, just business email series that's now up on our blog. So I'm going to share this on there. If you guys want to reference that, there's some good write-ups there, some good resources. So on that sales and marketing side, some good tools for you to look at. Now, I took a second to read through Marco's question for us. And I'm going to boil this down. And Marco, if I'm completely off, just send me a message in the chat box and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think essentially what Marco is asking, and he's actually a collective member, loves the fact that he's saving time, gets a bunch of value. His coaches are getting a lot of value from the session planning coaches. But his question is about a potential con being the fact that, it starts to become that as every gym starts to outsource, right? Like you're going to have CAP gyms, NCFIT gyms, comp train gyms. Does it start to become more about the programming that they subscribe to and less about the individual brands of CrossFit this, CrossFit that? Does that then become a con in that you're just another NCFIT collective gym to where if someone else in your areas doing the same programming, now you don't have that differentiating factor. I feel like that's what he's asking about a con, but what are your guys' thoughts on that? If I'm a collective gym and someone else is doing the same programming, down the block, is that an issue? Is that a con?
What about two gyms that are running Fran on the same day, or two gyms that are running Cindy on the same day, or two gyms that are running CrossFit.com on the same day? I kind of I understand what Marco's asking here. And like, yeah, the workouts matter to some extent. They certainly do. They're important. You have to have a well-planned program. It has to be thought out. You have to go out there and you have to execute it with precision. You got to be pumped up about it. But ultimately, like in the business that we're in, and we program functional training in a wide variety of ways. We program it through GPP with NC Metcon, which is as close to our signature on like a traditional CF style program as you would find. And we also have NCX, which is a strength and conditioning program, which involves a core strength lift and then a metabolic conditioning workout, a conditioning workout after that. We have a compete program. We have a bodybuilding program, a dumbbell only program. So within that matrix, we have a lot of variety. But also, like, when you go into a gym and the workout is on the board and it's a 5 rounds for time workout, the last thing that I'm ever asking is like, what programming provider authored this workout? Like, the first thing I'm worried about is, hey, is the gym look clean? Are the coaches friendly? Is the coach engaging at the start of the class? Are the members, all look like they're happy to be there? What's the environment like? How does the coach run the class? They on the phone the whole time? Are they eating the whole time? Those are the things that I'm worried about more so than like who wrote that workout, and is it the same workout that's going on, at the gym 2 miles away? So I don't necessarily think it's as big of a deal. I think that in terms of responsibility in regard to like a safe and effective program, that's just showing up, and the people that Gabe rattled off before, us, Cap, Comp Train, Mayhem, I can bet that all those guys are putting together safe and effective programs, but for us, it's much more about how is the program being administered? When you walk through the doors, what are you feeling? Yes, the workout's got to be fun. It's got to be effective. You got to get a great one. But a lot of times the coach is going to be the person who determines that in terms of like, what's the experience like?
Yeah, I think we're getting wrapped up. So I completely get the concept here for sure, and I think there's validity to it. I actually think we should have mentioned it as a con, because at some point, if all the gyms are utilizing the same program, how do you stand out? How do you differentiate? And you actually become a competitor of each other's more. Well, I think this idea that CrossFit gyms around the world outsourcing, I actually think is going to be a good thing overall for CrossFit personally. I think the inconsistencies that have occurred inside the walls of a box have been really challenging. And I've been to a lot of gyms, and when you have these major discrepancies, it actually starts to create some inconsistencies in the brand and what people are expecting. So I actually think some consistency across the board would be a good thing for the overall industry. But that aside, MDV said the nail on the head. Like, no one walks into a gym. Very few people even tell their members they're using the NCFIT Collective, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is the business getting resources from a provider that allows that business to put out the best product they can on the floor. And ultimately, the head of the show is the head coach who needs to go out there and perform. Can we provide the tools to help them do that? And I think that when you look at it through that lens, it's not so much about the 21.15.9 versus 9.75. It's about what are the additional tools that we're providing to give them the freedom to go out there and express it in the best way possible. And I don't think it matters if I have it or the next gym down the street. If you're a better coach, if you're a better ran business, if you're a better business, you're going to thrive over someone else. Because think about it this way. People can't really differentiate between one CrossFit gym and another. The one that performs better, the cream rises to the top. That's always been the way it is. So whether they're using collective programming or something else, all that really matters is, are they running a more successful business as a whole? And we are a piece of trying to help them get there.
The one time that, I will be honest, I think the one time I think that this might be a con or a consideration or a concern is only if it's literally like right next door, And then I think you have the option of when somebody parks their car and they go, is this over here cool? Or is this over here cool? And then they have that kind of option where they're going to go, both workouts are the same. I'm just going to go to whatever gym I feel better at. That's the time when it could be a con, I think, but even then the cream is always going to rise to the top. We had that same situation in NCFIT Campbell. They weren't running our workouts right next door, but they were running a gym, a functional training gym, literally right next door.
Literally next door.
And that's the only time I would really be like,
But even then,
MDV,
you're saying that you'd pick the one that you felt better at.
Oh, of course. Well,
yeah.
The athletes are always going to go to the one that they feel better in, or the one that they like the coaches more, the one that's cleaner, the one that's cooler. Like it's more so those factors than necessarily like, you're not going to go to a dingy, shitty gym where the coaches are terrible and people are mean just because you think that a couple of the workouts are better. Like, I don't think that happens really.
Right.
So Beto had a couple of questions in the Q&A box that I'm going to try and get to now. But just a reminder, guys, we are in the last 10 minutes. We want to respect your time. So if you do have any questions, make sure to put them in either the chat box or the Q&A box. I'm looking at both. Beto, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to, just read through the question as best I can. But he's asking if the program service that we provide, are we more focused on helping the coach from a business perspective or having them be better physical trainers? So is the collective service more focused towards like the actual coach as a coach or the coach as a business professional? Is what I'm getting from the question.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at this one. So, I think that the way that I read that question is Beto might be asking, like, are we trying to teach the coach more about the actual mechanics of the movement and the points of performance of the movement? Or are we actually trying to teach them more about the actual administration of classes and how to run professional classes? And I think that that's a really interesting question, regardless if that was the ultimate intent. Sorry, Beto. But, we do both. We 100% do both. And I think that you need to do both in order to be a successful coach. You cannot just have a masterful command of the mechanics of the movement and then be completely devoid on any sort of skills on how to run your class. That doesn't work. And the opposite, you can't have masterful command on how to run your class and then have like shit mechanical knowledge. I actually think the latter there, the thing that I just explained, I would take that coach, the person who understands how to masterfully run a class and handle people and all those kinds of things and needs to study their mechanics more than I would take the technician who's the person who can't like talk to a person for more than 3 seconds, and it's awkward all the time. So, we obviously are providing class plans, and within those class plans, there are notes on how to administer the class, on how to take it to the next level, on soft things that you can do with the members and things that you can do to make the experience really great. But there's also a lot of technical knowledge in there. There's knowledge about the workouts, obviously. There's knowledge about the stimulus. There's knowledge about what warm-up to run. There's knowledge about how to run your timeline. There's knowledge about the teaching section, about how to adjust the movements. And within that teaching section, there's knowledge about the points of performance, the faults to look out for, the things that you can do to tweak for more advanced athletes, more beginner athletes. And that changes on a day-to-day basis depending on who's writing the brief. But there's a tremendous amount of information. Now, the one thing that when you come into this as a coach, you have to have some sort of baseline certificate or baseline knowledge of functional movement to coach functional movement. That should be assumed. We are not going to re-educate you on what an air squat is. We're not going to re-educate you every single time what the points of performance of the deadlift are. We're going to tell you, hey, today this is going to be the focus of the deadlift because we're doing 315 pounds for 5 reps at the start of every round. It's a heavy deadlift. Today we have to focus on midline stabilization with the athlete and making sure that before they touch that bar, they're absolutely certain that they can lift it without any sort of compromising of the spine in the midline. That's how we go about it. Now, whether or not we re-educate on the points of performance formally, no, but we do so on a daily basis where you're going through it every single day and relearning.
To kind of piggyback off of that a little bit on the fact that what we offer with the collective and what any good outsourced programming service should be providing is it should do both, in that it should help you coach the class that day, but like Beto said in the comment he just added, but also help develop the coach in the long term as well. And just speaking really quick from experience, when I first joined NCFIT, I was doing some coaching in my position as operations manager. And it was the first time that I was doing programming that came with the level of notes that we bring with the collective. And what I remember is that even though I wasn't experienced and I'd like to think a good coach at the time, what that allowed me to do is on a consistent basis, really know what I was going to do as a coach so that I can bring my personality and what made my classes a little bit more fun and exciting be more forward with that because I wasn't worried about what progression I was going to run or how I was going to warm people up or what my timeline should look like. And I think that that's a big value add to what we do, is the more that a coach, even an experienced coach, can come in and, having reviewed that outline, have all those things checked off. I know what progression I'm going to do. I know what the extended warm-up is going to be. I know what stimulus I want my athletes to hit. It just gives you a little bit more mental capacity and energy to bring some personality into the class and really kind of bring that added level of entertainment that is important in what we do. So I think that that's an important thing to add there. We're coming up on the last 4 minutes. So Jay, what do you want to close this up?
I just want to add in one thing. Like, I've been coaching for a long time, over 15 years, right? And I'm in the gyms on a regular basis. I use our programming on a regular basis. Like, this is, and I just want to reflect on one thing. Each coach has something to work on, right? Sometimes the coach needs more technical skills. Sometimes the coach needs to be a bigger version of themselves. I'm sure anybody listening or listens to this in the future has people on their team or them themselves who've received feedback on ways that they can improve their classes. I get it. What helps me is that when I go into a class like this morning, I already have the outline, like Gabe was saying, and now I could focus on what I need to focus on for me to be the best version. So like this morning, it's like, hey, I need to come with more energy, which typically isn't an issue, but let's just say that was something I was working on. I could then walk into the class. I already have my confidence built because I have the plan already, and I could focus singularly on what I need to work on, which might be different from what Gabe or MDV needs to work on, even though we're going off the same skeleton. So I think that's probably the best thing about having a plan that we never had for years. For years at the gym, we would just have to work out, and we would need to create the plan on the fly or ahead of time by ourselves. Now, all that plan has been taken out of the picture. So now I can focus on what I need to do as a coach to provide the optimal experience, which I think at the end of the day is like the greatest tool that we've ever provided our team. Keep in mind, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, the NCFIT was collective was designed for our gyms. We have been operating currently, we have between our partner gyms, our current gyms, our whatever, like 30 gyms that are underneath our umbrella, repping our brand and a part of what we run. If they suck, we have a really big problem. And so we created the collective for us to help our own coaches, and then realize it could be something we could sell. But it wasn't the opposite way. We created it for us, and now we sell it. And I think that's a really strong value proposition, because we're not just saying this out of our, office. We're saying this out of our gyms.
One last thing that I want to touch on, Jason, I think that that's a fantastic point. It was a completely selfish endeavor when we started the collective. We were like, yo, we got to get better. And I think that we're doing a great job of that. So thank you for highlighting that. One of the questions that I get quite a bit is like, hey, I've got a coaching staff that's like super beginner, or I have a coaching staff that's super advanced. The way that we write our briefs, and I think that this is really beautiful and it's evolved this way, is that no matter what skill level you're at, the brief can be valuable for you. So the brief is an outline of how we best think the class could be run. Now, there's a million different ways that you can take a class. You can run it a number of different ways, and we all know that. But if you're a very advanced coach, you can look at that outline and you can look at it more like guardrails and be like, oh, NCFIT's over here and I'm over here, and I'm going to take some stuff, I'm going to leave some stuff, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to run a great class. You can still get awesome information from it. You can get valuable reminders. You can get some stuff that you might not have thought of in a while. You can get a refresher on the basics. You can get a refresher on how to handle some more advanced athletes, but you're using it more like guardrails, just staying within the bounds. Now, if you're a very, very beginner coach, this outline becomes like crutches for you along your journey. And then as you gain more confidence, you can start to find those guardrails a little bit more. But every day, it only takes about 15 minutes. You can read the brief, you can watch the video, you can see what our coaches think is important to highlight, watch what they're talking about in terms of faults or points of performance or things to watch out for, and you can get some knowledge going in. And even if you don't use it that day, you still file that away somewhere in your brain. You go, damn, I remember when they taught the power clean, they were talking about this, and then you can bring that up down the road. So I think that that's a really important point to remember.
Thank you, MDV. Thank you, Jay. We're right here at the hour. All I'm going to say to close out is I'm going to put my email in the chat box. Greg, if you have any follow-up questions that we didn't get to here, just shoot me a quick email. Next month, we're going to have another webinar, and we've already picked the topic. We're going to be talking about starting corporate programs, something we have a lot of experience with and that we get hit up with questions all the time. So stay tuned for that webinar, guys, and hopefully we will see you next month. And if you have any topics for future webinars that you'd like us to talk about, also shoot me an email. We always want to provide value and answer questions that you guys actually have. So Jay, thank you. MDV, thank you. Everyone that attended and watches the recording later, thank you. And we'll talk to you guys next month.
Thank you.